I still remember the exact moment my life shattered. It was a humid June afternoon, the kind that makes the air stick to your skin like an unwanted second layer. My mom had called a family meeting, something she rarely did, and her tone on the phone was sharp enough to slice through steel. I walked into the living room to find my parents, my younger sister Emily, and my grandmother sitting in a semicircle of judgment. Their faces were stony, unreadable, except for Emily, who looked at me like she wanted to crawl out of her skin. "We need to talk," my mom said, her voice trembling slightly. I'd been bracing myself for bad news, but I never could have anticipated what came next. My dad. The man who had taught me to ride a bike, who'd stayed up late helping me with algebra, who'd cheered the loudest at my high school graduation, wouldn't even meet my eyes. Instead, he slid a manila envelope across the coffee table toward me. "Open it," he said, his voice clipped. My hands shook as I pulled out a stack of papers. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at: DNA test results. My eyes scanned the page until I found the words that made my stomach drop: probability of paternity, 0%. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It means you're not my son," Dad said, his tone cold and unfamiliar. "And we need to know the truth." I looked at my mom, hoping she'd laugh and tell me this was some cruel joke. But her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Your father. Your real father. Is someone else," she finally said, her voice cracking. I made a mistake. The room spun. My knees buckled, and I sank into the nearest chair. I couldn't process what I was hearing. For 23 years, I'd lived my life believing I was their son, part of this family. And now, with a single piece of paper, they were rewriting my entire existence. I tried to argue, to reason with them. "A DNA test doesn't change who I am. I've been your son my whole life." "Dad, don't call me that," he snapped, his voice cutting through me like a knife. "I don't know who you are anymore." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. "You're just going to throw me away because of this? You're not part of this family," my grandmother said, her voice dripping with disdain. "We've been lied to for years. We can't trust you." Emily didn't say a word. She just stared at the floor, her silence hurting more than anything they'd said. I'd always been close to her, the protective older brother. I thought she'd stand up for me, but she didn't. By the end of the day, I was gone. They told me to pack my things and leave. No calls, no visits. Just gone. I spent that night in my car, parked in the lot of a 24-hour diner, staring blankly at the dashboard as the reality of my new life sank in. The next few years were a blur of struggle and survival. I'd been working part-time at a hardware store while finishing my college degree, but now, with no family support, I had to take on more shifts to cover rent and tuition. My dreams of graduate school faded quickly as I focused on just making it through each day. I'd reached out a few times, hoping to talk, to explain, to plead. Every call went unanswered. Every message was ignored. Eventually, I stopped trying. I told myself I didn't need them. That I could build a new life without them. But deep down, the wound never fully healed. Then, 5 years later, the phone rang. I was at work when I saw the number flash on my screen. My mom's number. My heart raced as I stared at it, debating whether to answer. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Hello?" There was a pause, and then her voice, hesitant and unsure. "Ethan." Hearing her say my name felt like a sucker punch. I hadn't heard her voice in years, and now it was pulling me back to memories I'd worked so hard to bury. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. We need to talk," she said. "It's important." I almost laughed. The audacity of her calling me after everything they'd done was unbelievable. But curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet her that weekend, at a small cafe in town. When I walked in, I saw her immediately. She looked older, more tired, but it was unmistakably her. She smiled nervously as I approached, but I didn't return it. "What do you want?" I asked, skipping any pleasantries. She sighed, fiddling with the edge of her coffee cup. "Your dad. He's sick. Cancer. It's advanced. The doctors don't think he has much time." Her words hit me like a freight train, but I refused to let it show. "And why are you telling me this?" "He wants to see you," she said, her eyes pleading. "We all do." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You mean the family that disowned me? The people who decided I wasn't worth their time because of a piece of paper? Now you want me back?" "It was a mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "We were wrong. I was wrong. Ethan, please." I stared at her, a whirlwind of emotions raging inside me. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her to go to hell. But another part, a small, wounded part, wanted to believe her. To believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have my family back. "I'll think about it," I said, standing up. "But don't expect anything." It took me weeks to decide. In the end, it was Emily who tipped the scales. She showed up at my apartment one evening, unannounced. I hadn't seen her since the day they kicked me out, and seeing her standing there, tears streaming down her face, was almost too much to handle. "I'm sorry," she said as soon as I opened the door. "Ethan, I'm so sorry." "For what?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "For abandoning me? For not standing up for me? For pretending I didn't exist?" She nodded, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "Yes. For all of it. I was scared, and I didn't know what to do. But I've missed you so much. Please, come back. Dad needs you." Her words broke something inside me. I'd spent so long building walls around my heart, trying to protect myself from the pain they'd caused. But seeing her there, so raw and vulnerable, made those walls start to crumble. The first time I saw Dad again, it was like looking at a stranger. He was thinner, paler, a shadow of the man I'd once known. He looked up from his hospital bed, his eyes filling with tears as he saw me. "Ethan," he whispered, his voice weak. "I'm sorry, I didn't know what to say." Part of me wanted to forgive him, to let go of the anger and pain. But another part of me couldn't forget how easily he'd cast me aside. "Why now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why did it take you dying to realize you made a mistake?" He closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. "I was a fool," he said. "I let my pride get in the way. I was hurt, and I took it out on you. But you're my son, Ethan. You'll always be my son." Hearing him say those words felt like a balm on an old wound. It didn't erase the pain, but it was a start. In the weeks that followed, I spent more time with my family. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of awkward, painful moments. But slowly, we began to rebuild what had been broken. My mom and I had long, tearful conversations about the past. Emily and I fell back into our old sibling dynamic, joking and teasing each other like nothing had ever changed, and when my dad passed away a few months later, I was by his side, holding his hand. Forgiveness is a complicated thing. It didn't happen all at once. And it doesn't erase the past. But it's a choice to let go of the anger and pain, to open your heart to the possibility of healing. My family and I still have a long way to go. The scars of what happened will never fully fade. But for the first time in years, I feel like I belong again. And for now, that's enough.